All right, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share a little bit about some of our values to just give you a little bit of context. So these are some of our aligning values. And again, these are ours. You're going to have yours, but I just wanted to, if you haven't had a chance to actually articulate these, or maybe you're looking at how can we re-express these, maybe this will just give you some ideas to bounce off of, and maybe you can then kind of use it to shape your own, or just clarify some of the values that you already have. But our aligning values, we have 10 of them, and one is we'll honor Christ and his church with integrity. We'll do anything short of sin to reach people who don't know Christ. And by the way, what we did, this is just an important thing to note, about 3 years ago, we actually had our team go through and force rank these by order of importance. And you say, well, aren't they all important? They are all important, but some are more eminent than others. And let me just give you an example. We all need food, water, and air to survive. I can only survive about maybe 5 to 10 minutes without air. I can go 3 days without water. I can go maybe 40 days without food. So they're all three necessary for life, but some are going to show itself to be a real problem sooner than others. And so that's kind of the thing there. So obviously integrity, our team viewed, was the most important thing that we had. And so when we're looking for people to come to our team, this is the one that's going to show itself the first. Second one, this is why Life Church exists, because we'll do anything short of sin to reach people who don't know Christ. We'll always bring our best, which talks about our excellence mindset. We'll give up things we love for things we love even more, which is about sacrifice. And then we're spiritual contributors, not spiritual consumers. And that's just the whole concept of the church doesn't exist for us, but the church actually exists for the world. The Life Church doesn't exist for the people that are in Life Church. Life Church exists for the people that have not yet come. And so it's just important that we do that. And the other thing, too, that's important to know is that we had 7 of these core values the very first day that I walked into Life Church 22 years ago. So they have remained consistent. Now, we've changed how we talk about them. We've changed some of the wording. We've made them into more action-oriented statements than just a single word. But the context of who we are has been consistent since Craig founded the ministry almost 25 years ago. And that's just an important thing, because core values should literally be core. They should not, if you find core values changing, then I would just question whether or not they're actually core values or not. So this is the next one. We're faith-filled, big thinking, bet the farm risk takers. That's just the willingness to take risk. We don't routinely bet the whole church on crazy things, but we just want to have a mindset that we're willing to take risk. And more importantly, we want to have the mindset that our team understands that it's okay to fail. It's okay to strive and try to achieve big things when there's the risk that you may fail. And then when failure happens, you have to be willing as an organization to deal with it in a way that is life-giving and helpful rather than hurtful. And so what I don't want is, we never want our team afraid to take risks. You can never build a truly high-performing culture if people on your team are afraid to take risks. If they're afraid to fail and they never fail, then that's a problem, and you'll never truly achieve everything that I believe God has for you. So then we'll lead the way with irrational generosity. This is an example of an aspirational value that actually became a real value for us. We're all about the capital C church. That's really important to us. We will laugh loud, hard, loud, and often. And I don't need people, necessarily everybody on the team, to be a comedian. But what I do need is for people to have a predisposition to having fun, because ministry can be really hard, as you all are well aware. And so I need people that, again, are just looking forward to making it as fun as possible, because, again, we want this to be a place that people are looking forward to coming to work each and every day. And then finally, we'll wholeheartedly reject the label megachurch. And that's really just about our mindset to what we do. And anytime we think that we would be big, then that causes us to think differently. And we're so small relative to the need. Even in cities where we have ministered for many, many years, there are still so many people that have no idea about the love of God. And so that's just, again, to help us understand that we are really, really small relative to the mission that God actually has for us. And that's just an important thing for our mindset. So those are our aligning values. Now I want to talk a little bit about sustaining attributes. And again, these are those permission to play. And these are things that need to be true of somebody for them to actually sustain over the long haul in this ministry, which I already said is not easily. And again, these are in order of importance, just like we talked about, or eminence, I should say. So the first thing is self-awareness, just how aware somebody is, and are they willing to actually grow and understand and learn more about who they are as God reveals ourselves to ourselves over a period of time. He doesn't choose to do that all at one time. He chooses to do that in layers, very similar to an onion, based on different things that are happening in our life, different opportunities, different exposure to different things, different challenges. God reveals our character to ourselves, and he does it over time. And so I just need people to be willing to step into that, because we believe that self-awareness is actually the first step to all growth and development. And so that's why it's so critical in our context, because we expect and need to grow as an organization individually and collectively all the time. Work ethic is really important, because I've already said it's not necessarily an easy place to work. And so the ability to work hard over time is an important part of being on our team. Teachability and humility are really important. Obviously, resilience over the long haul. If someone's going to sustain in ministry, I think resilience, particularly spiritual resilience, is a critical component to what you do. And because you will have difficult days, and we need people that can have difficult days and then come back the next day ready for a whole nother shot. Flexibility is important. We're in a high change, fast-paced organization, so the ability for somebody to be flexible and nimble is important. Cultural relevance is simply that is this somebody on our team, we have to be able to connect to the people that we're trying to reach. We are in the world, not of the world. And so we have to understand enough about the people that we're trying to reach so that we understand how to reach them where they are. And that's what that is. Are you connected enough to what's going on that we can actually have meaningful ministry and meaningful places to meet people exactly where they are, just as God met us where we were? And then finally, again, sense of humor is on that again. I've already talked about that. But those are our examples of sustaining attributes. And so when you put those two things together, it really comes into a powerful ability to bring a varied group of people together around these common values and around the commonality of passions and these attributes that are within them. And I think when you put those two things together, you have an extremely powerful combination that can actually help you move forward. And you have a group of people that are more likely excited about what they're doing and why they're doing it. Now, here's something else too that's interesting that we believe and we have found. And I want to just talk about generations for a little bit. This is actually the breakdown of the workforce of Life Church, and it's an important thing to realize is that 2% of our team are boomers, and I am one of the 2% at Life Church that happens to be a boomer. Then we've got 25% are Gen X, 61% are millennials, and 12% are actually Gen Z. So we've got 73% of our team are millennials and Gen Z. And so there's been a lot of books written about how to connect with different generations and are the problems when you have a multi-generational workforce coming together and actually working together. And by bringing people onto the team based on a set of values, then those values cut across generation, they cut across experience, they cut across race, they cut across ethnicity, they cut across spiritual diversity, they cut across all those different kind of things because everybody on the team shares the same set of passions and has these attributes that are similar. So I'm not looking for 20 million millennials. I'm looking for a couple of thousand millennials that actually have the values and the attributes that we're actually looking for. I'm looking for a few boomers that have the values and the passions qualifications and the attributes that we're looking for. I could say the same thing about each one of those things. So by having a values approach to actually bringing people onto your team and understanding what those are, you have a much better ability to cut through some of these things that can really trip a lot of organizations up if you're not really careful about that. So that's just something that we have found over the course of time. Now, I want to talk a little bit about human systems, and I want to talk about values-based processes. And again, every one of these processes is values-based. And you can see that we have got selection, that's bringing people onto the team. I've talked about that. You have onboarding, how they actually come onto your team and what you actually do around the concept of onboarding. You've got training, performance management, recognition, compensation, benefits, performance improvement, and selection. So you have all these things. Again, all these things should be rooted in that same set of values. They should permeate everything that you do and all of these values-based processes. Now, let me have a question for you is, what is the single most important contribution a leader or a group of leaders can make to any organization? What is the single biggest contribution that leader is going to make? And I believe that the single biggest contribution that we make as leaders is who we bring on to be part of our team. As I look and understand more about engagement and more about culture and more about some of the things that I've already talked about, I understand that more and more and more, it is the team that you have that allows those things to be possible. If you would have asked me 3 years ago what the most important input was to a fully engaged workforce or a high-performing culture, I would have said 100% it's the leadership input. In other words, I do believe that people leave leaders, right? Not organizations. I do believe people will stay with great leaders, even in organizations that aren't great. And so I do think that that's true. And the leadership component is important because as leaders, we can certainly make sure that engagement doesn't happen. We can make sure that we create an environment so toxic that nobody wants to come to work. We can certainly do that. So as leaders, it's important that we remove those obstacles and set the stage for that to happen. But the single biggest thing that I believe allows for engagement and culture and this life-giving sense about we're all in this together is having the right people on the team. And I think as leaders, we can overestimate our ability to develop people to a standard. And it's just a common mistake. So what we have to do is we have to bring people onto the team that are already at the standard that we want on these critical components, which I talked about relative to these attributes, right? And so that's just an important. People ask me sometimes, how do you get Life Church DNA into your team? And generally, I get that question after a church or a ministry or somebody has come and spent time in our ministry. They spent time with our teams. Maybe they've done a tour or maybe they've come and just wanted to learn something. And that happens all the time here. And generally, they'll interact with a lot of different team members. They interact with a lot of different campuses, both at Central and at our different locations. And then they'll come back knowing what they've noticed is this consistency, this continuity of thought, this continuity of how people interact and how people respond and they'll say, man, it's so consistent. How do you actually do that? How do you get Life Church DNA into your team? And I say, I don't, because it's not up to me. I can't put DNA into people. Only God can put DNA into people. So what I say is we find people that have Life Church DNA already in them. But you have to understand what it is that you're looking for. You have to understand those sets of values, those attributes that are actually critical to the success of somebody being on your team. And I will take a little bit of a backtrack and say, when we talk about those sustaining attributes that I've talked about earlier, how did we even come about those? How did they come to exist? And how they came to exist was early on, Life Church has always been a fast-growing ministry, like many of yours. And we always, even today, about 80% of our team comes from within. In other words, they're attending at a campus somewhere, and then they end up finding they're passionate about getting into ministry, and they move right in for ministry from whatever vocation that they were at before, and they became part of our team. And we were actually having a higher failure rate than I was comfortable with. And it's really complicated when somebody who's attending your church comes and becomes part of your team and it doesn't work out. And then They're no longer part of your team, whether it was their decision or our decision, either one. But now the church, which is generally the place of refuge for people, now it's the church that's actually part of the problem. And so I had enough of those conversations, I guess, and I thought we have to do something better. We have to get better at this. We have to have the percent of success higher than it is right now. And so what we began to do is we looked at the people that were actually thriving in our ministry. And the first recognition that I had to come to is that this is not an easy place to work. And I had to stop telling people and trying to convince people to come and be part of our team. Tell them how amazing it was going to be, and it's going to, man, it's how great. And I was doing the whole sell job on trying to get people to come and join our team, and that just wasn't working. So what we did is we looked at the people that were thriving. We looked at the team members that were actually not just getting by, but they were actually enjoying, and they were excited, and they were passionate about what they were doing. And we developed this list of attributes and say, these are some things that are consistent with people that are thriving in our ministry. And so that's where you came up with these kinds of values. And that's where the sustaining attributes actually came from. It came from not understanding that and failing, to now then it's actually something that's a really important thing. And then the other thing that I changed too was I stopped trying to convince people to come and work to be part of the team. And I began to say things like, hey, if you're interested in working harder than you've ever worked for in your life, you probably make less than you've ever made in your life, but you want to make a huge difference. If you're interested in that, then this might be the place for you. And that changed everything. And so what I realized is the pace of the process with which somebody came onto the team and the pace of the organization had to match. They had to be congruent. And so that's just something that I think will be helpful. So make sure that as you bring people onto your team, you have these sets of values and look for the people on your teams that are thriving. And okay, those are the things. And then to the best that you can, develop a selection process that's built around those values, and it's built to identify those values in people. And that's where we start. So again, this is these processes that I've talked about. And as we go through, I'm going to talk about them a little bit more. But let's just talk a little bit. We see two things. We have performance management. We also have performance improvement. And I've talked about building a high-performing culture. And so the important thing about this is performance matters. And I'll tell you why. We have to have clearly defined wins. People have to understand whether or not they're winning or not. I mean, that's just a fundamental part of striving. God put, I believe, inside all of us this ability and this desire to strive. And I would say that because we keep score. We keep score at all. And you say, well, what does keeping score at a basketball game have to do with God and his church? But when you look at, we keep score at everything. I mean, there's not an event. That's why the people flock to the Olympics. That's why, I mean, it crosses culture. It crosses geography. It crosses generations and generations. There's always, God put something inside of us to strive for something. And so we should have a clearly identified marker that says, hey, I know that I'm winning or not. That's just an important thing. We should have regular feedback around those key performance indicators that say we're winning or we're not winning. And I don't think that it's okay to set things that'll actually stretch us. And sometimes it's okay. That gets back to failure. And you should have goals that are stretching, and it's okay not to meet them from time to time. And that doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Performance awareness systems. Do you have ongoing systems where you have conversations around performance? And for us, we have an annual review process that we would do every year in the first 3 months of the year. And so we review everybody at the same time. And the only reason I talk about that is because literally everybody in our whole organization is talking and thinking about how they did last year, how they performed relative to the goals that they had. And then they're going to be looking at setting new goals for next year. And that kind of conversation, when the whole organization is talking about performance at the same time, that builds this mindset that, man, performance is important. It's important that we achieve. It's important that we strive. And I don't think that there should be any reason why a church or a ministry shouldn't be striving to achieve great things relative to what God has for us. Now, they're all God birthed, God breathed visions and passions from Him, but it's important that we figure out, God, what do you want us to do, and then how can we measure that? And here's something I also understand is that I know that everything that's important can't be measured. I know that everything that's measured isn't important. And we understand that, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some things that you can clearly identify that, hey, this is going to be a win for us when we actually achieve it. And you should celebrate wins. This is honestly something that we're trying to get better at doing. We're so forward-minded that sometimes we don't always do that, but you should take time to celebrate the wins. And that's important. Well, you have to have them because you can't celebrate something if you don't know you've won. And then also you have to just understand to be rigorous in what you're doing. Now, so performance does clearly matter when you're building a performance-minded culture and a life-giving culture. And there's no disconnect between a life-giving culture and a high-performing culture. Those two things, I believe, work hand in hand. And I think this is a great example of that. So